Hollywood in the late 1970s was a battlefield disguised as a playground, a place where money, ego, and raw imagination collided daily in the hope of producing the next big cultural explosion. And into that chaos stepped a project that looked, on paper, like a golden ticket: Flash Gordon. Long before Star Wars reshaped the galaxy of sci-fi cinema, the pulp hero Flash had been king of serialized adventure, a name built on cliffhangers, rocket ships, and melodrama that thrilled generations of young readers. But by the time Dino De Laurentiis acquired the rights, the property was less crown jewel and more tarnished relic, a challenge to resurrect with style, power, and profitability. Dino, a titan of production with a taste for spectacle and a temper for control, wanted not just a hit, but a cultural eruption to rival George Lucas's juggernaut. He gathered a constellation of talent, a script that oscillated between camp and satire, and a director whose sharp wit might have turned pulp into postmodern poetry. But the gravitational forces of greed, insecurity, and clashing visions pulled the film into a trajectory no one could control. What began as a cinematic gamble soon evolved into a backstage nightmare of sudden firings, secret negotiations, legal threats, and corporate fear. The vision fractured, the tone shifted, the unity of purpose splintered under pressure from financiers, distributors, and powerful egos unwilling to compromise yet terrified of losing everything. At the center of this maelstrom stood Sam J. Jones, a young actor plucked from relative obscurity to play Earth's savior. Blonde, square-jawed, athletic, and brimming with earnest energy, he looked like the hero that pulp legend demanded. But behind the scenes, his relationship with the production soured almost from the start. Conflicts over pay, treatment, and creative respect escalated from tense meetings to cold silence. And by the time principal photography wrapped, Jones had effectively walked away. Hollywood, however, rarely pauses for personal grievances. Deadlines crush compassion. And so, with a major motion picture in post-production and a leading man unwilling to return for essential ADR, the studio made a ruthless but effective decision. Replace the voice. Enter Peter Marinker, a seasoned British performer with the uncanny ability to mimic not only tone but rhythm, a vocal chameleon hired in secrecy to dub every word of Flash Gordon's dialogue. The deception was flawless, buried beneath press tours, marketing gloss, and a cultural moment too distracted by spectacle to question authenticity. Audiences worldwide cheered for a hero whose lips spoke one story, while a stranger's voice carried it into history. Decades later, when the truth emerged, it landed not like a scandal but like a secret finally given shape. Proof that in Hollywood even identity itself could be edited, erased, and reassigned for the sake of a release date. Producer Dino De Laurentiis was a master of momentum. Once a film started rolling, it could not stop, no matter what fires raged behind the curtain. De Laurentiis had burned through screenwriters like matches, chasing tones that ranged from solemn epic to campy satire, hiring and dropping directors, flirting with big names like Fellini and Sergio Leone only to abandon them for creative and budgetary clashes. Mike Hodges, the eventual director, inherited not a vision but a compromise. He wanted irony. The financiers wanted broad comedy. The fans expected pulp melodrama. And somewhere in the middle lay a project that pleased no one fully yet had to satisfy everyone partially. Every production meeting was a battle of tones. Every casting choice a tug-of-war between Hollywood tradition and continental experimentation. Even costumes became arguments, ornate, dazzling on camera, but crushingly heavy and often hazardous on set, turning Ming's regal stillness into a matter of survival rather than performance. Nothing about Flash Gordon moved smoothly, yet the machine kept turning because too much money had been spent to turn back. Dino did what all power producers do when trapped. He forced forward motion, betting that if they finished fast enough, the noise behind the scenes would fade before it could catch up. For director Mike Hodges, the project became a slow-motion artistic tragedy. Hired for his wit and intelligence, he found himself stripped of authority piece by piece. Storyboards rewritten overnight, actors receiving contradictory instructions from producers, edits made without his approval. Each day carved away his sense of ownership. Hodges stayed because walking away would have been professional suicide, but he stayed like a man strapped to the wheel of a ship being steered by 10 competing captains, each convinced they alone knew the way to shore. In private, he confided to friends that the film no longer resembled the one he signed for. The satire had dulled, the character arcs flattened, the political undertones stripped in favor of bright, bombastic spectacle. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, Flash Gordon was no longer a film, it was a salvage operation. In public, Hodges kept his composure, his name attached to a movie that bore his credit but not his heart, and like many directors in similar positions, he let silence guard his dignity, leaving the fans to discover decades later that the cheerful chaos on screen had been born from bitter chaos off it. Actors soldiered on through absurd physical challenges. Max von Sydow, one of the greatest actors of his generation, spent hours immobilized under Ming's 70-pound robes and elaborate crown, moving not with regal stillness but under genuine physical strain. Brian Blessed, whose booming laugh and fearless energy made him the heart of the Hawkman kingdom, performed stunts under rigging so unreliable it nearly killed him when a mechanism failed mid-flight. Extras fainted under studio lights in heavy armor. Makeup departments battled allergic reactions and melting prosthetics. The film's lavish appearance came at a bodily price, and few outside the production ever knew it. Hollywood sells glamour. It does not advertise heatstroke and bruised ribs. Yet the footage sparkled, and so the suffering was quietly archived. Another uncredited sacrifice at the altar of cinematic illusion. Meanwhile, international censorship shredded what little coherence the movie possessed. Different countries cut different jokes, romantic beats, even entire action sequences. Some territories demanded moral sanitization, others political neutrality, still others visual modesty. By the time Flash Gordon finished global release, no two prints were identical. A fan in London saw a different arc than one in Tokyo, who in turn watched a story missing jokes that made scenes make sense in Los Angeles. The fractured distribution created a strange phenomenon. Millions bonded over a shared cultural artifact that, technically, never existed in one true version. Flash Gordon became cinematic quantum mechanics, a single title with multiple realities, each enthusiast convinced theirs was definitive, none realizing they had all been witnesses to pieces of a puzzle never fully assembled. Even the music carried hidden drama. Queen's iconic score, now celebrated as genius, was a legal tightrope walk in its day. Inspiration skated dangerously close to protected motifs, and negotiations behind the scenes blurred the lines between homage and infringement. One aggressive lawsuit at the wrong time could have bankrupted marketing, delayed release, even ended careers. But in Hollywood, silence is a currency, and the quiet deals that protect one empire often shield another. George Lucas himself owed a debt to Flash Gordon, having borrowed its aesthetic DNA to build Star Wars. Flash Gordon's rights holders could have sued. Lucasfilm could have countersued. Both sides chose détente over mutually assured destruction. History remembers the movies. It does not remember the lawyers who kept them breathing. The comic book adaptation added insult to injury. Legendary artist Al Williamson poured craftsmanship into panels reshaped by committees into a hollow marketing tie-in. His elegant line work shackled to dialogue he despised. His sense of story mangled to match a movie already in flux. The result a perfectly drawn, utterly soulless product that satisfied no one. Not the artist, not the fans, and certainly not the studio, which had hoped for a second wave of revenue from devoted readers. Williamson never spoke at length about the project again. His silence louder than any rant, a quiet verdict from one of comics' most respected craftsmen. Some work deserves to be forgotten. Plans for a sequel flickered briefly in boardrooms. Concepts were drafted, sets partially designed, story beats teased that promised redemption, perhaps even greatness. But the U.S. box office numbers arrived like a death certificate. Whatever international cult love had sparked, it was too little, too late, and too uneven to justify a second gamble. Contracts unraveled. Lawsuits lingered. Agents scrambled to save careers scorched by proximity to a radioactive property. Some actors reinvented themselves. Others vanished from mainstream cinema altogether. The wreckage of Flash Gordon became a cautionary tale. Proof that spectacle without strategy, and vision without unity, could burn tens of millions and leave nothing but neon-colored ashes. And yet, time, the great trickster, redeemed what the system discarded. Fans kept the flame alive. Nostalgia, irony, camp appreciation, and genuine affection combined into a cult following that turned disaster into legend. The film that once symbolized everything broken in studio filmmaking became a beloved artifact precisely because of its flaws. It was fearless in its excess, bizarrely sincere in its ridiculousness, a pop opera that never apologized for being too much. It outlived lawsuits, outlived reputations, outlived the cynicism of its birth. Flash Gordon proved, in the end, that cinema's greatest magic is not perfection, but resilience. That from chaos can come joy, from sabotage can rise myth, and from the wreckage of egos and errors can emerge a story so wild, so human, that audiences embrace it not in spite of its madness but because of it. A masterpiece by accident, a relic by design, a warning and a wonder all at once. Flash Gordon, the beautiful disaster that refused to die.